I believe that once people start paying attention, this divine intelligence that's bigger than us has a way of guiding us. If you're clicked in, you get the urge to act through your intuition. And it seems that that is what you're expressing. You listen to that intuition, move to the next thing. And that's exactly how it happened to me. That's why I actually write about my careers, because it's the journey of the way I was pushed. That's this gentle push.
Welcome to the Daily Soul Bytes Show. I am your host, Bolaabimbola, frequency alchemist, life coach, and energy practitioner. Daily Soul Bytes Show is where we have guest authors, coaches, and entrepreneurs in the fields of spirituality, psychology, and leadership, sharing their insights for the expansion of collective consciousness. And today I have a returning guest, the wonderful Sophia Demas. Welcome to the show, Sophia.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me. And it's so nice to see you again.
So nice to see you as well, Sophia. And I read a bit about your bio again before we start. Sophia has enjoyed 3 diverse careers, a decade in architecture, running a couture fashion business, and working as a mental health therapist. She recently retired as an in-house counselor for ex-trafficked women. Sophia began experiencing miracles at the age of 19 and chronicled her experiences in 2 books, The Divine Language of Coincidences, How Miracles Transformed My Life After I Began Attention, and Consciousness Beyond Death, True Stories of Signs, Messages, and Timing. And the last time Sophia was here, we spoke about her book, which is talking about coincidences. But this particular episode, we really wanted to look at consciousness after death. And so I asked Sophia to come back so we can really delve more into that. So I'd love you to tell us, because, this is something that, as we go through life, we realize that we're having the first career, the second career, the third career, and it's like a stepping stone. Each one is expanding us in some way. But it's sometimes helpful to understand the thread of the soul, the theme of the soul. And I wanted Sophia to talk to us about that, because she's had 3 successful careers. Could you tell us, Sophia, what is something that has run as a thread, a soul thread even, across your 3 careers, and even more to come?
Well, I've thought a lot about that. And all I can say is that it has been a spiritual journey. My goals have changed dramatically from when I began, my first career. So, the first career, I wanted to design the beautiful building. And then that changed into solving shelter problems, shelter issues, or the lack of shelter, And then, and I was greatly influenced by Dr. Buckminster Fuller, who I had the good fortune of working with right out of architecture school. And then it was like I got far from beauty, designing biotechnology laboratories, and I felt a calling to sort of raise self-esteem in women. Well, first I wanted to just design beautiful dresses to bring me back to beauty. But then, I noticed that there were some women that just had it all together, and some women, even beautiful women with tons and tons of money, were miserable. And so that sent me back to school to get my master's in counseling psychology. And then I created a program to elevate self-esteem in women at risk. So it was like, going from the surface to a deeper calling. And so it's been that kind of a journey. And then these miracles that were happening in my life, that people would go, oh, you should write a book. You should write a book. And I'm like, what am I going to write a book about? Oh, these things only happen to you. And then I, reconnected with a childhood friend, and I told her my latest miracle. She said, oh, these things only happen to you. And then boom, I went, wait, there's just too many happening. And that is when I decided to write the book, when I realized that before each miracle, there was a coincidence, and I took action on the coincidence, and I got exactly what I needed at just the right time. And after I wrote the book, there were so many events that I took out all the ones that had to do with death, which includes after-death communication. And that is my second book. And so what I think is exciting is that both books have gotten the attention of scientists. The synchronicity is trending in science right now. So I was just at the right place at the right time. And at first, scientists were not interested in my second book. But it just was serendipitous that just before publication of my book, science got serious about after-death communication. In fact, even the letters, ADC is now official. And what they're saying is that even though, like NDEs, the person comes back and is able to report their experience. Here, the people that you're having communication with are not coming back. And so now what science is looking at is that in the face of the sheer weight of anecdotal experiences, a scientist must take these into consideration. So there's been scientific interest in this book.
Thank you so much, Sophia. I love the fact that you started out looking at creativity, creating the buildings, creating shelter, creating beauty, and you were also looking at creating your writings, and sharing your gifts. And creativity seems to be a very strong theme for you, because sometimes we don't, I know that I have had to come to understand that transformation is really key for me, and all the things that I have done in my life, first as a medical student, and then as working as a mental health counselor, and also working to transform the health service here in the UK, and now really working with my clients around that, shifting from that low frequency of trauma and pain to higher frequencies of joy. And it's always being about transformation. And this is helpful because we don't always sometimes realize that even though we are changing careers, there is something we're carrying through, and it's never a waste. No experience, no career is a waste. And I think that's just something that I feel I am called to say about that. So thank you so much for sharing that.
I believe that you are clicked in. I believe that once people start paying attention, this divine intelligence that's bigger than us has a way of guiding us. So if you're clicked in, you get the urge to act through your intuition. And it seems that is what you're expressing. You listen to that intuition, move to the next thing. And that's exactly how it happened to me. That's why I actually write about my careers, because it's the journey of the way I was pushed. That's, it was this gentle push.
Mm-hmm. Indeed, indeed. I love that. There is something guiding us, even
Yeah.
if we're not aware, even if we're not conscious of it. There is a guide there, and that is important. And I know that, when we met last time, we were talking, and I mentioned near-death experience, but that is very different from the after-death communication that you do. Tell us about what after-death communication is and what your book is about.
Well, the book is okay. There's 10 chapters in this book, and 7 of the 10 chapters are my own experiences, and 3 are those of 3 very close friends, and they're just, I the that this Consciousness Beyond Death is actually available also as an audiobook. And when I was recording it, I just couldn't believe that these things happen. And and I think the key is to be open to it, to be open. And I credit my mother for this because as a child, she would say, "Oh, if you need anything, just ask little baby Jesus, and if you need protection, just ask the little Virgin Mary." And so what she did is she instilled in me this, without even being conscious of it, that communicating with unseen beings is perfectly natural. So these signs started to, happen to me. I can't. I start the book with communication that happened with my father after he made his transformation, and they're just unbelievable. I mean, and the okay, one of them, I'm going to give you an example. My husband and I went to a friend's daughter's wedding, and which was in upstate New York. And I so we had to get like an Airbnb. And my husband said that he got an Airbnb close to the wedding, which was out in this farm. He said, "I got it for 2 nights." And we were on our way up to Maine. A friend of ours has their own island. It's a private island in Maine. And I said, "What? Like, why would you get a room for 2 nights that is going to take, a night away from the island?" He said, "Well, I thought maybe we needed a little rest, And I went, "What are we going to do in Ontario?" He says, "Well, there's there's this big river." I said, "I'm going to, waste a day looking at a river." I couldn't understand what. And then he said, "Well, I thought maybe you would think that the hosts were interesting." And I said, "How so?" And he said, "Well, the man was in broadcasting for 40 years, and he's writing his second book, and his wife is a Reiki person, and she's offered to do a meditation in the morning." And I went, "Oh, all right, we'll do it a spa day, okay." So we go there, and very nice people. And in the morning, she said, "Oh, just so you know, I have to leave at 10 because I'm doing a book signing at the bookstore in Lilyvale." And I said, "A book signing?" I said, "Oh, I said, well, what's Lilydale? Is that like a?" She says, "Well, it's a gated community." And then she said, "Well, it's a spiritual community." And I went, and Frank just went, "Okay, we'll go." Okay. So we go to this spiritual community that ended up being, it's seasonal. It's from, I believe it's from May to September. And all these mediums congregate, and these people go to have a reading with a medium, and so it's all these people are, of course, open to this. So when we went to the book signing, the manager said, "Oh, my host told her about my book, and she says, well, when it's done, we'll give you a reading. And I thought, that's why we're here. We're here because I get to have a reading of my book. And then she says, oh, it's Sunday today. See, we have two message ceremonies on Sunday. One's at 2 and one's at 7. I said, what's a message ceremony? And she says, that's where all these people congregate in the assembly hall, and these mediums give messages. I thought, oh my God, that sounds fabulous. It's like this, like a show, you know? So we go to the assembly, and I wanted to go in the back so I could watch people's expressions. And I had no desire to go to a medium. I mean, absolutely none. So each medium would give messages to two people. So she would say, you with the red hair, okay, I see this person in overalls who's tinkering with cars. Could it be your uncle? And they would go, yes, that's my Uncle Roy, and I'm like, maybe 5% said, no, that I don't know anyone like that. And then they would say something like, oh, maybe the message is meant for somebody else. So I'm just absolutely I can't believe this. This is so entertaining to me. And then towards the end, this medium says, you with the white hair. Well, I look around, like half the people there had white hair, the white hair and glasses. Yeah, white hair and glasses. I was wearing my glasses. And so all these people have white hair and glasses. And I'm like, and then she says, you with a green headband. And I went, me? Yes, you. Will you receive? Will you receive? I said, sure. So she says, there are two men. One is your grandfather and one is your father. And my father, I found out after he died, because, he and I we loved each other, but we would fight. And we would fight, and then we would make up. Well, during one of our fights, he told a family friend how terrible I was. And she told me this, which I thought was not very tasteful, So the medium says, your father is the one who has the message for you. He knows that he said some very inappropriate things, and he's sorry. And he wants you to know that he's full of love for you. He's full of love for you. I couldn't believe it, because I guess that was bothering me from time to time. Everything healed. When she said that to me, everything healed. I'm sorry. This is what really sucked me in. When she said, it's your father, she said, he's short and stocky. And then she changed it. And she said, he's short and, sinewy, because he was all muscle. And I couldn't believe it. I could not believe that she pinpointed that in him. So she had my full attention. Then she says, and your father has a message for your nephew. So I have two nephews. And one was quite troubled, but I thought it was the other nephew that I have a close bond with, Yanni. And she said, your father wants your nephew to know that if he crosses to the other side, he will be very sorry that, that he left the earth or something like that. So I thought, oh my God, because he had a drug problem, a severe drug problem. So I call him up and leave a message. And I said, look, something very strange happened. I got a message from your grandfather, but I'm not going to leave it on the phone, on your voicemail, but you have to let me know if you want to hear. So he says, yes, 7:00 tonight. And what he told me was his wife had it with his drinking and drug problem. She had taken the 3 kids to her parents' house. She had moved out. And he says, I was sitting there with a gun in my hand. So for my father to come through completely unplanned and to give these two extremely pertinent messages to me and how we got there. I mean, we got there on a Sunday. That's when they do the message ceremonies. My husband made the appointment for 2 nights, which he didn't even consult me. And the host was having the reading at this particular place. So to me, this has just become normal for me. You know, I've had so many advice. He still gives me advice. My mother and the things that happened with her. And it's just been, I'll give you one with my mother, you know, and okay, so my nephew Yanni, who I have this wonderful bond with, just before publication, and this is interesting because 2 of the stories in the book are happened to 2 of the closest people near me. One is Yanni, my nephew, and one is my best friend, Mary. And I know all of their stories, and yet both of them told me a story that they had not told me before, but thought they had. So Mary's is absolutely incredible. She received a poem from her father after his death that was channeled through somebody in her AA meeting that wrote it down and gave it to her. And I knew her father, and it's mind-boggling. So Yanni says, oh, I don't think I've told you this story. And I said, what? And he says, you know, I didn't tell you the story about Teddy. That's his son, his oldest son. And I said, well, what happened? And he said, well, Teddy was 3 years old. He was a year and a half old. I'm sorry. He was a year and a half old. And I'm in the kitchen feeding him. And the only words that he could say was mama and papa. And we tried to get him to say other things, but he wasn't ready. So I'm feeding him in the kitchen, and I'm doing the airplane thing, you know, to get him to eat. And he's kind of distracted. And he said, all of a sudden, he looks over my left shoulder, and his eyes get huge, and his mouth drops, and then he starts giggling, staring. And I said, Teddy, what are you seeing? And he goes, yeah. Well, yeah is the word for grandmother in Greek. Greek, you know, kids who are Greek American who don't speak Greek will go yeah. But he said it, yeah. This was never told to him. So my mother showed up to introduce herself, and there's just no doubt. So, and then, you know, when there's no doubt, you start asking, you know, and you know, there's departed loved ones who don't want to show up. So it's not your problem, you know, they don't want to show up. But I've had it's just been just an incredible fact for me. It's a fact that once we die, without a trace of doubt, we simply shed our bodies. And we are as conscious as you and I are right now. And I believe that the stories in my book prove it. And that's why I wanted to share it with people, to sort of give hope and comfort. Because what this means is after we go through our transition, we can communicate with our loved ones that we left behind.
I love that. You know, this is so true. These stories in the book will really enable us to feel much more comfortable with getting that information, continuing to relate to those who we loved and who have now moved on. So I love that inspiration that your stories in your book, Consciousness After Death, will inspire. Nothing around us allows us to feel that we can be free. And it's only when we step into that unchanging space. But I wanted you to talk about that as your final words today, Sophia. How those who have experienced trauma, who are not really wanting to step out of that space of where the ego is protected, the ego wants to protect us. How do you advise your final words on how we can begin to step into a more soul aligned
I feel
experience?
like when trauma has damaged someone, I find it very difficult to do it alone. Okay. And so I would advise people to seek, a counselor that could help them. They can actually read about trauma, because then it's like, it's not out there. Or it's not just me. Oh, I mean, there's other people who feel there's one book. Oh, there's this one book that this young woman wrote that went through, who had complex trauma and tried very, very hard to heal herself, which she eventually did. And I read the book and I was absolutely captivated. The name of the book is What These Bones Know. And it was a very, I could see somebody that has experienced trauma to see that somebody else and how they coped with it, and that it was a success story. And they need to know that it can be a success story.
Mm-hmm. The soul really does allow us to go through some experience that then brings us closer home, And thank you for sharing your experiences across your work as a writer, creating books that really encourage a more swifter expansion into the soul life force and into that soul experience. And, where can people find you, Sophia, when they want to connect with you?
Well, my website is my name, Sophiademas, DEMAS.com. And I mean, my books are available on Amazon, through my website. They're pretty much can be ordered anywhere. So, it's, and I want your audience, what I want your audience to take away from this is, these things cannot just happen to this one person, if they can happen to me, they can happen to anyone. It's just where my mindset was and how open I was, and to listen, and then to take action when these coincidences happen, so that you can get a miracle, or to listen to the signs of someone giving you advice. I had, this is very quickly, I told my ophthalmologist that I had written my second book on signs, consciousness beyond death. And she said, well, I have a story for you. And I said, well, okay, and she said, well, my husband and I had to go to a gala, and I didn't want to go because I was so dead tired. I had surgeries all day. I didn't want to go, but we had to go to this gala. So afterwards, she said, I had to take the babysitter home because my husband refuses to be alone with a female babysitter. And she said, and on my way back home, all of a sudden, she said, I heard my grandmother scream, wake up. And she goes, I came to, and I was heading into a brick wall. So what she told me is that she was unconscious. She had fallen asleep at the wheel. And at that somebody can say, well, maybe it's a dream. What, at that exact time while she's heading into a brick wall? No, she was saved by her grandmother. And sometimes it's not as dramatic as that, but there's departed loved ones that want to advise us, want to tell us that everything's okay. And it's there more often than not. And a lot of people, once we start talking about it, people start, oh, wait a second, something happened with my mother who has passed. And I find, like a penny when a friend, that feels that there's communication from her sister who passed, finding the penny at just the right time. So that's what I hope people understand, that I'm not special. These things don't just happen to me.
Thank you so much, Sophia. Thank you for joining me again today for part 2. I loved your company and our conversation.
Thank you. So did I. Thank you.
And I look forward to seeing our audience again, our community, our growing community. I invite you to connect with Sophia, really expanding that understanding of consciousness after death, understanding that trend of life and the different threads that we tend to weave across our careers, and really about writing and creativity. And also connect with me on my courses and my work. I look forward to to chatting, or just DM me. That would be nice. And I invite you to subscribe to Daily Soul Bytes Show, and I will see you on the next episode of Daily Soul Bytes Show. Bye bye.